Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your daily English dose. We're so excited to have you join us for another deep dive into a fascinating topic. It'll really boost your English and introduce you to some amazing history.
It's wonderful to be here, yeah. And today we're exploring something, well, truly iconic. Reshaped the world, really.
That's right. Today, we're plunging into the British invasion. You know, that pivotal time when British music and culture just exploded across America and then, well, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
To really get how big it was, let's think back to late 1963 in America. It was a quieter time, almost somber, still reeling from the JFK assassination.
A national tragedy, yeah. A difficult period.
Exactly. And there was this real longing for something new, something exciting to fill that space. The pop music then was, well, frankly, pretty tame.
A bit mild, perhaps.
Yeah, think teen idols, polished songs, often quite innocent, but lacking that raw energy, that punch of early rock and roll.
Right. America was definitely ready for a jolt, something fresh they hadn't heard in a while.
Precisely. And that's just what the British invasion delivered. So this term, it describes this incredible phenomenon where UK rock and pop artists suddenly started dominating the American charts.
Completely taking over.
Yeah. We're talking about a period starting dramatically around February 1964 with that band's arrival.
I think we know who you mean.
Yeah. And it really lasted until about 1967. And this wasn't just like a quick trend.
No, far from it. It was a seismic shift, culturally.
Totally. So our mission today is to unpack this. How did a group of young musicians from this small island spark such a massive cultural revolution? How did it change music, fashion, youth culture? And why does it still matter today?
That's a great question.
And you're going to learn some amazing history and, of course, expand your English vocabulary along the way. Okay, so to start, what was actually going on in Britain at that time? What allowed this cultural explosion to happen?
Well, it's kind of strange, actually, a bit of a paradox, because this huge creative boom, the invasion, it came out of a time of real economic struggle in post-war Britain.
Really?
Yeah, the country was nicknamed the sick man of Europe. Lots of industrial problems, declining economic power globally. It created this sense of frustration, especially for young people, a kind of longing for something more.
Okay.
But, and here's the key thing, within this hardship, a powerful new group was rising. The teenager. After the post-WWII baby boom, this generation, for the first time really, had some disposable income, more leisure time.
Ah, right. They weren't just kids anymore.
Exactly. They were their own group, a consumer group, wanting their own culture.
So wait, the economic problems didn't stifle creativity? They actually kind of pushed young people to find new ways to express themselves.
Precisely. It's a classic example, really, of how cultural creativity can just bloom, even when times are tough economically. You know, with traditional paths perhaps looking less promising, young people found other ways.
Like music and fashion.
Music and fashion became incredibly powerful outlets, a way to project a new identity, globally even. So while Britain's traditional economic hard power was maybe fading a bit, its youth were creating this powerful new kind of influence, soft power, we call it, driven by cultural appeal.
Soft power. I like that. So the invasion is proof that cultural influence can thrive even without massive economic might.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic testament to that.
Okay, that sets the scene perfectly. But what about the sound itself? Where did this new energetic music actually come from? What were the ingredients?
Well, interestingly, the roots were very much American, just re-imported, you could say.
We imported, how so?
Import cities like Liverpool, especially, where the Beatles came from.
Right?
American rock and roll and R&B records came in with sailors, U.S. servicemen, and they found this really hungry audience among working-class kids. And this was crucial because a lot of that raw R&B, sometimes called black music back then, was getting softened, commercialized in America itself.
Ah, okay. Watered down a bit for the mainstream.
Kind of, but
Yeah.
in the UK, its authentic, raw energy was just embraced. It felt incredibly exciting, real to young people there.
So British musicians were sort of rediscovering and re-energizing American music that maybe some Americans had started to overlook.
Exactly. And a huge catalyst for this whole thing was the skiffle boom.
Skiffle, right, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it was this massively popular DIY, do-it-yourself music style, kind of folk, blues, played on really simple, often homemade instruments.
Like washboards.
Washboards, tea chest basses, basic guitars. It just dramatically lowered the barrier to entry for making music. Anyone could basically do it.
Okay.
So thousands of young people, including a young John Lennon, started their musical journeys in skiffle bands. It really shows how important it is for aspiring artists to just start making music with whatever you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't wait for the perfect gear.
Right. And that skiffle boom created this huge pool of musical talent all across Britain. So what we see here is this prime example of something called cultural arbitrage.
Cultural arbitrage.
Yeah.
Okay, explain that.
Basically, British musicians imported American music, they soaked it up, then they infused it with their own unique British style, their energy, their perspective, and then they exported it back to America as something fresh, exciting, revitalized.
And it worked because it felt familiar but also new.
Exactly. Familiar roots, but a totally new energy. It just resonated.
Fascinating. Okay, so beyond just the music, you mentioned youth culture shaping things back in the UK. This was before the bands even hit America big time.
Oh, absolutely. It gets really interesting here. Young people weren't just listeners, they were living these lifestyles, these distinct groups with their own styles.
Okay.
So the early 60s in Britain were really defined by two main, often clashing youth subcultures, the rockers and the mods.
The Hods and Rockers.
Yeah.
Right. Classic.
Yeah. The rockers were more working class rebels, kind of a continuation of the 50s Teddy Boys. They had the leather jackets, the motorcycles, loved 1950s American rock and roll Elvis, Gene Vincent.
That tough biker image, very American influenced.
Exactly that. And then on the other side, you had the mods. They started more in London. Much more sophisticated, very fashion conscious.
Tailored suits.
Tailored Italian suits, yeah. Military parkas to keep the suits clean on their scooters.
Scooters, right. Vespas, Lambrettas.
Uh-huh. And their music taste was more towards American R&B, soul, modern jazz. It was a very distinctly British style of cool, very modern.
Okay, so two really different vibes. How did a band like the Beatles fit into all this, or did they?
Well, that's what's so interesting. It shows how crucial image and style were, even for a band with that much raw talent.
Right.
The Beatles, under their manager Brian Epstein's guidance, they cleverly borrowed from the mod aesthetic.
The suits.
The matching suits, definitely. And that haircut, the mop top, which seems normal now but was revolutionary then, that distinct, longer kind of bowl shape.
Right, it stood out.
It totally stood out, and it made their rock and roll energy acceptable, even appealing to a much wider audience. It packaged the raw energy in this polished, almost respectable way.
Smart. So it appealed to mods, but also didn't scare off the mainstream quite as much.
Exactly. Brilliant positioning, really.
Okay, and beyond the look, the sound itself, the Beatles sound was obviously key. What made it so unique musically?
Well, their basic sound, that Mersey beat from Liverpool, named after the River Mersey,
Right.
it was just undeniably energetic, infectious pop, but it was their musical innovations that really set them apart. They went way beyond the simple three-chord rock and roll structures.
They're complex.
Oh, yeah. Complex harmonies, really sophisticated chord progressions. Bob Dylan famously called their chords outrageous. He couldn't figure them out at first.
Wow, Dylan said that. High praise.
Absolutely. This musical depth gave their pop songs a kind of timeless quality. It really expanded what pop music could even do.
So they weren't just playing catchy tunes, they were pushing music forward.
Totally. And they were also genuine pioneers in the studio. They completely changed how recording studios were used. The studio wasn't just for capturing sound, it became an instrument itself, part of the creation.
How did they do that?
They embraced all the cutting-edge techniques they could find or invent. Things like ADT artificial double tracking to make vocals sound fuller, tape loops, running tapes backward.
Experimental stuff for pop music then.
Very. And they boldly brought in unusual instruments, sitars, string quartets, adding these layers and textures nobody was really hearing in pop.
So they were basically inventing modern music production as they went along. Incredible.
It really was. And maybe the most crucial thing, they pioneered the idea of the self-contained band.
Meaning they wrote their own songs.
Exactly. They wrote their own material. This was radical then. The norm was the Tin Pan Alley model, where professional songwriters wrote the hits for the artists.
Right, the Brill Building songwriters and all that.
Precisely. But the Beatles, carrying that DIY spirit from skiffle, they wrote their own stuff. And that set the new standard for rock bands.
So it all adds up. They weren't just great performers, they were true artists, creating everything from scratch.
Absolutely. Writing, playing, pushing studio boundaries, the whole package.
Okay, let's jump forward now. The moment the invasion really explodes in America, It wasn't slow, was it? It was like a lightning strike.
Not slow at all. The fuse was lit spectacularly. February 9th, 1964, the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show.
The big one?
The really big one, a true cultural watershed moment for America. Over 73 million people watched.
73 million? That's insane. What percentage of TVs was that?
Estimates are like 40 to 50% of all American TV owners at the time, just massive. They apparently got 50,000 ticket requests for just over 700 seats in the studio.
Wow. The hype was real, and the impact must have been instant.
Oh, completely instant. Well, maybe a lot of parents were scratching their heads thinking it was noise, strange haircuts. For young people, it was just electric. People described it like a brick to the head, just pure excitement breaking through that post-JFK quietness.
And inspired other musicians, too.
Hugely. So many future rock stars, Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, they all point to seeing that one performance as the moment they knew they wanted to be in a band.
Amazing. It's so rare for one TV show to have that kind of lasting effect on a whole generation.
It really is. And what's funny is how much of the media at the time just missed it. Critics called the music almost a disaster, predicted it would be a short-lived fad.
Shows how wrong critics can be.
Yeah.
But it definitely wasn't a fad. Soon, everyone was talking about Beatlemania. What was that exactly, and how should we think about it now?
Right, Beatlemania. It was this intense, sometimes overwhelming fan craze, mostly young women screaming, fainting, just total devotion.
Sounds chaotic.
It was. And initially, adults, the media, they often dismissed it pretty condescendingly, called it female hysteria.
Not very respectful.
Not at all. But looking back, many cultural historians see it differently now. They reevaluate Beatlemania as maybe an early form of, primitive feminist girl power.
Interesting. How so?
Well, it was one of the few public spaces where young women who were often really constrained by society back then could just collectively express passion, desire, even rebellion without apology.
A space they controlled.
Exactly. A rare moment where girls were really driving a huge cultural phenomenon.
That's a really powerful way to look at it. Changes the whole perspective from just screaming fans to, well, something more meaningful.
It does. And it wasn't just emotion, right? There was a massive commercial side, too.
Oh, yeah, the merchandise.
Huge. Everything wigs, boots, lunchboxes, you name it, got the Beatles image slapped on it. It created a completely new model for music marketing. This was really the moment teenagers showed their power, their economic and cultural clout on a global scale.
Setting the stage for future pop crazes.
Absolutely. It laid the blueprint for boy bands, pop marketing, and it cemented teenagers as this key target for the culture industry. We still see that influence everywhere today.
Okay, so the Beatles kicked the door down, but they were just the first wave, right? They opened the floodgates for a whole fleet of other British artists.
They absolutely did. Their success showed there was a path to America, and wow, did others follow quickly. A whole diverse range of acts.
Like who were the other big players?
Well, you absolutely have to talk about the Rolling Stones.
The bad boys.
Exactly. They were deliberately positioned as the dangerous, raw alternative to the more friendly Beatles. Their music was really deeply rooted in authentic American blues and R&B. And actually, one of their big contributions was helping America rediscover its own musical heritage.
That's ironic, isn't it? British bands reminding America about blues.
It really is. And their image was rebellious, overtly sexual sometimes, appealing to that more outsider part of youth culture.
So while the Beatles cleaned up rock and roll's image, the Stones kind of dirtied it up again.
That's a good way to put it. Then you had The Who.
Maximum R&B.
Yeah. They pushed beyond pop and blues, really forging a path towards hard rock, art rock, even early punk sounds, known for Pete Townshend's massive power chords, that aggressive sound, and of course, smashing their instruments on stage.
That definitely got attention. A real statement.
It certainly did. They also pioneered the whole rock opera concept with albums like Tommy. Very ambitious.
Okay, Stones, who else was key?
You absolutely have to mention the Kinks, often called the most British of the big bands.
Why, most British?
Ray Davies' lyrics. They were full of sharp social commentary about everyday British life, class, tradition, the fading empire, often witty, sometimes a bit sad, very specific.
And musically.
Musically, they were pioneers too. That distorted guitar riff on You Really Got Me. That's basically a blueprint for hard rock and punk. Really influential sound.
Wow. So it sounds like the British invasion wasn't just one sound at all. It was incredibly diverse.
The diversity was crucial. You had the Beatles as pop innovators, the Stones as blues purists, the Who as kind of anarchic rockers, the Kinks as social
The
commentators.
whole spectrum.
Exactly. It offered this broad range of musical and cultural identities. That's why it had such richness and lasting power. It could appeal to different kinds of kids.
Makes sense. Were there other important bands too?
Oh, definitely. Bands like The Animals, with their huge bluesy hit House of the Rising Sun, Herman's Hermits for more commercial pop, and you had great female vocalists like Dusty Springfield bringing that blue-eyed soul sound. It just showed the breadth of talent coming over.
So clearly more than just a flash in the pan. This reshaped culture on so many levels. What were some of the really big long-term changes the invasion brought about?
The impact was just profound, and it lasted. First off, fashion, a total revolution. The Beatles' mop top, like we said, was this symbol of rebellion against the short, conservative haircuts of the 50s. Older people often hated it.
Right. Hair length became a battleground.
It really did. And that initial smart mod style evolved later in the decade into more colorful psychedelic fashion, which directly influenced what young Americans were wearing.
Okay, fashion.
What else?
Media and the music industry got completely rewired. Old TV shows like variety shows aimed at older audiences got canceled. New shows popped up, Shindig, Hullabaloo specifically to showcase these exciting British bands.
Catering to the new youth market. Exactly. And in the music industry itself, the album, the LP, it transformed. It stopped being just a collection of singles and became this cohesive artistic statement. Think Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. It was conceived and received as a complete work of art, start to finish.
That's a massive shift. The album is art.
Huge. And related to that, artist empowerment.
Yeah.
Because bands like the Beatles wrote their own songs and were so successful. The old power structure where professional songwriters held sway was broken. Artists gained unprecedented creative control. That's pretty much the model we still have today.
Wow. That's a fundamental change in how music is made.
Absolutely. And then there's the connection to the counterculture. The British invasion provided the perfect soundtrack for what was happening in America and the anti-war movement, civil rights, questioning society.
The music spoke to that generation.
Deeply. The Beatles especially went from pop stars to being seen almost as social leaders. Songs like All You Need Is Love became anthems for the Summer of Love generation.
So it all connects the music, the fashion, the social change. Like a feedback loop.
It was exactly that, a
Yeah.
transatlantic feedback loop. It wasn't just Britain influencing America. British artists were heavily influenced by American counterculture too. Remember the Beatles meeting Bob Dylan?
Right, that famously changed their songwriting, made it more serious, more poetic.
Exactly. And the psychedelic sounds coming out of San Francisco definitely influenced a Sgt. Pepper. So British artists lit the spark, gave it a global stage. American counterculture provided some of the philosophy, the political edge, and then British bands absorbed that, amplified it through their huge popularity, and beamed it back out to the world.
A conversation across the ocean, constantly evolving.
Perfectly put.
So, looking back, the British invasion, it wasn't just a moment, was it? It was this massive fundamental shift, and we still feel its echoes today.
It really was a kind of perfect storm. You had the social factors, the economic situation in the UK, the technology like TV. It all came together. It definitely ended America's complete dominance in popular music and established Britain as a real cultural superpower. It revitalized rock and roll, injecting those R&B roots back in, but also pushed it towards being seen as a serious art form. The legacy is just immense. Albums as art, the self-contained band, the whole model for global pop superstardom, it all stems from that period.
And the influence kept going, didn't it? We even saw a second British invasion in the 80s.
That's right, with bands like Duran Duran, Culture Club, Eurythmics, using new platform, MTV, just like the Beatles used Ed Sullivan.
It's that same pattern, isn't it?
Yeah.
British artistry, new media, captivating America all over again.
And continuous model, yeah.
Which brings us to an interesting question for you, our listener. Think about how technology and media keep changing. What do you think the next big cultural invasion might look like? And where might it come from this time? How do you see it shaping our world? Something to think about. Well, that's it for this deep dive. We really hope you've enjoyed learning about this incredible period in music history and maybe picked up some useful English vocabulary, too. Join us again soon for another fascinating topic right here on your Daily English Dose.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.